The phone call that changed everything came at exactly 11:47 p.m. My daughter's voice was shaking so badly I could barely understand her words. Mom, please. I need your help. Everything's gone wrong. 3 days earlier, she had looked me straight in the eye and told me I was worthless baggage who needed to disappear forever. Now she was crying like a lost child, begging me to save her from the mess she'd created. But here's the thing about burning bridges. Sometimes the person you leave stranded knows how to build boats. Drop a comment below and tell me what country or state you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers around the world. My name is Dorothy Martinez, and until 2 months ago, I lived the quiet life of a 69-year-old retired school secretary in Phoenix, Arizona. For 45 years, I was married to Thomas Martinez, a hardworking accountant who built a successful tax preparation business from nothing. When Thomas died suddenly from a stroke at 73, I thought my biggest challenge would be learning to live alone in our big house. I was so very wrong. My daughter Christina is 42 years old and works as a real estate lawyer in downtown Phoenix. She married Marcus Thompson, a financial advisor, 8 years ago. They have 2 kids and live in one of those fancy neighborhoods where every house looks like it belongs in a magazine. Christina always seemed like the perfect daughter, successful, beautiful, always dressed in expensive clothes and driving cars that cost more than most people make in a year. After Thomas died, Christina started visiting more often. At first, I was grateful for her attention during such a difficult time. She would arrive with expensive takeout food and talk about how worried she was about me living alone. Mom, this house is way too big for one person, she would say, looking around like she was already planning changes. All these stairs, the yard work, the maintenance bills, it's not practical anymore. Christina kept bringing pamphlets for senior living communities. She would spread them across my kitchen table like she was showing me vacation brochures. Look at this place, Mom. They have activities, people your age to talk to, and you wouldn't have to worry about cooking or cleaning. What she really meant was that she wanted me out of the way so she could claim her inheritance without dealing with an inconvenient mother. The warning signs were everywhere, but grief makes you blind to things you don't want to see. Christina started talking about money constantly, how expensive everything was, how worried she was about my financial future, how complicated Thomas's business affairs had become. Dad's paperwork is such a mess, she would complain. Marcus and I have been trying to sort through everything, but it's going to take months to understand what's what. She convinced me to let Marcus handle the initial paperwork while I focused on grieving. I signed papers without reading them carefully, trusting my daughter and son-in-law to protect my interests. Looking back, I can see how perfectly they set the trap. 8 weeks after the funeral, Christina arrived at my house with Marcus and 3 large moving boxes. She walked in like she owned the place, which I was about to discover she believed she did.
Mom, sit down.
We need to have a serious conversation about your situation. Marcus pulled out an official-looking folder while Christina arranged herself in Thomas's favorite chair like a judge preparing to deliver a verdict. We've been going through Dad's will with our lawyer, Christina began, and there are some things you need to understand about your financial reality. The way she said, your financial reality, made my stomach drop. This wasn't a daughter talking to her grieving mother. This was a businesswoman delivering bad news to a client. Marcus opened the folder and pulled out several documents. Dorothy, according to these papers, Thomas left the house and all major assets to Christina. He felt she would be better equipped to manage such a large inheritance. I stared at them, trying to process what they were saying. That's impossible. Thomas showed me the will years ago. We discussed everything. Christina's expression didn't change. Dad updated everything 6 months before he died. He was concerned about your ability to handle complex financial decisions. The cruelty of it took my breath away. My husband, who had held my hand through 45 years of marriage, had supposedly decided I was too incompetent to inherit our shared life. I don't believe you, I whispered. Believe what you want. Christina said coldly. The legal documents are clear. This house belongs to me now, along with the business and all investments. You've been living here out of my generosity, but that arrangement needs to change. Marcus leaned forward with fake sympathy. We've found you a nice apartment in a senior complex on Roosevelt Street. Very affordable, close to medical facilities. Perfect for someone in your situation. Someone in my situation. A 69-year-old woman who had just been told she owned nothing after 45 years of marriage. How much? I asked quietly. How much what? Christina replied. How much did Thomas leave me? Christina and Marcus exchanged a look. Mom, Dad left you enough to cover basic living expenses. A small monthly allowance that should be sufficient for a simple lifestyle. That's when the truth hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just taking my house, they were taking everything and leaving me with table scraps. I raised you, I said, looking directly at Christina. I gave up my career to take care of you and your father. I worked part-time jobs to pay for your college while Dad built his business. And we're grateful, Christina said in the tone you'd use with a difficult child. But gratitude doesn't change legal documents. Then she delivered the killing blow. You need to pack your things today. We're moving in this weekend, and frankly, having you here would be awkward for everyone. Today? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, you're 69 years old. How many good years do you have left? Why don't you just go find somewhere quiet to spend them and stop making this harder than it needs to be? Go find somewhere to die. That's what my daughter was really saying. I packed my life into 2 suitcases and a cardboard box. 45 years of marriage, 24 years of raising Christina, decades of birthday parties and family dinners and quiet evenings watching TV with Thomas. All of it reduced to what I could carry. Christina stood in the doorway, checking her phone while I gathered the last of my belongings. She didn't help, didn't offer words of comfort, didn't even pretend to feel sorry about what she was doing. There's a Motel 6 on Indian School Road, she said without looking up from her phone. Very clean, reasonable rates. You should be comfortable there while you look for something permanent. Marcus loaded my suitcases into their Lexus SUV with the efficiency of someone disposing of garbage. Dorothy, you're going to love having your independence back, he said. No more worrying about property taxes or home repairs. No more home, he meant. Imagine raising a daughter for 42 years, only to be thrown out like garbage. If you can stomach that kind of cruelty and still not hit subscribe, drop a comment below explaining why you think betrayal like this is acceptable. As we drove away from the house where I'd lived for 30 years, I watched it disappear in the side mirror. The rose garden I'd planted, the kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals, the bedroom where Thomas and I had shared our dreams and fears. All of it now belonged to my daughter, who saw it as nothing more than a real estate transaction. The Sunset Motel was exactly what you'd expect from a place charging $52 per night. Stained carpets, paper-thin walls, and the kind of bathroom that makes you want to shower in your shoes. Christina handed me $220 in cash like she was tipping a hotel maid. This should cover you for a week, she said. Marcus will transfer some money into your account once we finish sorting through Dad's financial records. Some money. From my own inheritance. After they left, I sat on the sagging bed and tried to understand what had just happened. In less than 4 hours, I'd gone from grieving widow to homeless senior citizen. The daughter I'd sacrificed everything for had thrown me away like an expired coupon. But as I sat in that depressing motel room, something started nagging at me. Thomas had been incredibly organized about important documents. He'd shown me the will multiple times over the years, explaining every detail, making sure I understood our plans for the future. The man who labeled everything in his office and kept copies of every receipt wouldn't have made such a drastic change without discussing it with me. Thomas loved Christina, but he also knew her flaws. He'd often worried about her sense of entitlement, her expensive tastes, her tendency to see money as something that should flow freely in her direction. Would he really have left me with nothing while giving her everything? The next morning, I used the motel's sketchy Wi-Fi to search for Thomas's lawyer, Benjamin Walsh. He'd handled our house purchase, Thomas's business formation, and various legal matters over the past 15 years. His office was in downtown Phoenix, about a 40-minute bus ride that would cost me precious cash, but felt necessary. Benjamin Walsh was a distinguished man in his mid-70s with intelligent eyes and an office filled with law books and family photos. When his receptionist announced that Mrs. Martinez was there about her husband's estate, he looked genuinely surprised. "Dorothy, my dear, I was wondering when you'd come in. I tried calling your house several times, but Christina said you were traveling to visit relatives."
Traveling.
That's what my daughter had told him. "Mr. Walsh, I need to ask you about Thomas's will." He looked confused. "Of course. Didn't Christina provide you with your copies after the reading?" My heart stopped. "The reading? Dorothy, you were supposed to be there. Christina said you were too distraught to attend, and that she'd handle everything and make sure you received your inheritance." The blood drained from my face. "Mr. Walsh, I was never told about any reading. Christina told me she inherited everything." Benjamin Walsh's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. He reached for a thick file folder, his movements suddenly urgent. "Dorothy, that's impossible. Your husband's will is very specific about your inheritance." He pulled out a document I recognized, Thomas's neat signature at the bottom, witnessed and notarized. But as Benjamin began reading, I realized Christina had lied about absolutely everything. "I, Thomas Eduardo Martinez, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath to my beloved wife Dorothy Martinez the following: our primary residence at 2847 Saguaro Lane, including all furnishings and personal effects. Additionally, I leave her 75% of all financial assets, investments, and accounts, totaling approximately $24 million. $24 million. The house. 75% of everything." Benjamin continued reading, his voice growing more serious. "To my daughter, Christina Martinez Thompson, I leave $9 million to be held in trust, with distributions beginning on her 45th birthday, contingent upon her respectful treatment of her mother following my death." Contingent upon her treatment of me. Thomas had known. Somehow, he'd predicted exactly what Christina would try to do. "Mr. Walsh," I whispered, "Christina told me I inherited nothing. She moved into my house. She gave me $200 and told me to find a senior facility." The elderly lawyer's face flushed with anger. "Dorothy, what Christina has done is called elder abuse and fraud. She's committed multiple felonies. But she had legal documents. She showed me papers. Forged, most likely, or documents from an earlier draft. Your husband updated his will 8 months before his death, specifically because he was concerned about Christina's attitude toward money and her treatment of you." The room was spinning. All those family dinners where Christina had talked over me, dismissed my opinions, rolled her eyes when I tried to contribute to conversations about their expensive vacations or Marcus's investment strategies. Thomas had been watching, evaluating, making decisions. "There's more, Dorothy. The trust provision for Christina specifically states that if she fails to treat you with dignity and respect following my death, her entire inheritance reverts to you instead." I stared at him in shock. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying your daughter just cost herself $9 million. Her inheritance is now yours as well. You're not inheriting $24 million, Dorothy. You're inheriting $33 million plus the house and all personal property." She lost everything, only to rise higher than anyone expected. If you don't subscribe after hearing this twist, at least be honest in the comments about why you'd ignore a story that proves karma is real. The irony was so perfect it was almost beautiful. Christina had been so eager to steal my inheritance that she'd triggered the exact clause designed to protect me from her greed. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice barely steady. Benjamin smiled, and for the first time since Thomas's death, I saw genuine warmth directed at me. Now, my dear, we call the police about the fraud. And then we call Christina and inform her that she's about to receive the shock of her life. Can she fight this? With what money? She's about to discover that every account she thought she controlled actually belongs to you. Every investment, every bank account, every asset except the house is frozen pending investigation of her fraudulent activities. I thought about Christina in my house, probably already planning renovations, shopping for new furniture with money she thought was hers. Marcus was probably calculating how the inheritance would affect their lifestyle and investment portfolio. They had no idea that their entire world was about to collapse. Benjamin Walsh's office became headquarters for what he cheerfully called Operation Justice. He contacted the police, the banks, and a private investigator while I sat in his leather chair, still processing the magnitude of Christina's deception. The forged documents are quite sophisticated, Detective Rivera explained as she reviewed the fake will Christina had shown me. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime. Someone planned this very carefully. You think Christina had help? I asked. Almost certainly. Creating convincing legal forgeries requires specific knowledge and connections. We'll need to investigate whether Marcus or someone in his financial network was involved. Within 3 hours, every account had been frozen. Christina's credit cards, linked to what she thought were her new inheritance accounts, were declined. The house utilities, which she'd already transferred to her name, were suspended pending ownership verification. My phone rang at exactly 4:15 p.m. Christina's name flashed on the screen. Mom, where are you? There's some kind of problem with the bank accounts. They're saying Dad's assets are frozen. Hello, Christina. I'm sitting in Benjamin Walsh's office. You remember him, don't you? Dad's attorney, the one who read the real will to an empty room while you told him I was traveling. Silence. Then, Mom, I don't know what you think you discovered, but I discovered that you're a liar and a thief, sweetheart. I also discovered that your father was much smarter than either of us realized. You don't understand. I was protecting you from the complexity of managing all that money. You've never had to deal with investments or... I understand perfectly. You forged legal documents, committed fraud, and threw your 69-year-old mother out of her own house because you thought I was too stupid to notice. Her voice turned sharp, desperate. Mom, you're confused. The grief has been overwhelming, and someone is obviously taking advantage of your emotional state. The audacity was breathtaking. Even caught red-handed, Christina was trying to manipulate me. Christina, dear, let me clarify something for you. Not only did you never inherit anything, but your actual inheritance, the $9 million your father left you, is now mine as well, thanks to a lovely clause he included about treating me with dignity and respect. That's impossible. Detective Rivera is sitting right here if you'd like to discuss the impossibility of fraud charges with her. The phone went quiet. I could almost hear Christina's mind racing, calculating, searching for an angle. Mom, please. Can we meet somewhere and talk about this reasonably? I'm sure we can work something out. Oh, we'll definitely be meeting soon, at the courthouse when you're arraigned. You wouldn't dare press charges against your own daughter. Something cold and final crystallized in my chest. Watch me. I hung up and looked at Benjamin, who was beaming with approval. How long before she's arrested? I asked. Detective Rivera has enough evidence for a warrant. They'll pick her up this evening. And Marcus, his financial records are being subpoenaed. If he participated in creating those documents, he'll face charges too. My phone buzzed with a text from Christina. Mom, please don't do this. Think about the grandchildren. I showed the message to Detective Rivera, who smiled grimly. Emotional manipulation, classic behavior pattern for this type of crime. I typed back. I am thinking about them. They deserve to see what happens when you steal from family. 25 minutes later, Marcus called. Dorothy, surely we can resolve this privately. Christina made some poor decisions, but involving the police seems excessive. Marcus, did you help her forge those documents? That's not. Dorothy, you have to understand the pressure Christina was under. She was worried about your mental state, your ability to handle large sums of money. So that's a yes. It wasn't malicious. She genuinely believed she was protecting you by throwing me out of my house and telling me to find somewhere to die. Marcus was quiet. Marcus, here's what's going to happen. You're both going to be arrested. You're both going to face federal fraud charges. And I'm going to be sitting in my house, watching it all unfold. Dorothy, please be reasonable. I was reasonable for 45 years. It didn't work out well for me. The police arrested Christina at 9:15 p.m. while she was having dinner at Mastro's Steakhouse, apparently celebrating her inheritance with Marcus and another couple. According to Detective Rivera, she screamed about false arrest and demanded to call her lawyer, who turned out to be Marcus's golf buddy and had no experience with criminal law. Marcus was arrested at his office the next morning. The forensic accountant had traced the forged documents to a printing company Marcus's firm used for creating fraudulent investment prospectuses. Apparently, my son-in-law had quite the criminal resume that Christina either didn't know about or chose to ignore. Justice finally caught up with them. If you're still watching and haven't subscribed, I need to know, why let their betrayal pass you by without standing with Dorothy? Comment your excuse below. I spent my first night back in my house, really my house now, sleeping in the master bedroom. Christina had already moved her belongings into the space, replacing Thomas's careful organization with her chaos of designer clothes and expensive cosmetics. I packed everything into garbage bags and left them on the front porch. She could collect them when she made bail. The house felt different now, not because Thomas was gone, but because I was finally seeing it as mine. For decades, I'd maintained it as Thomas's sanctuary, designed around his preferences, his needs, his vision of how we should live. Now, looking around with clear eyes, I realized how little of me had ever been reflected in these rooms. That was about to change. Benjamin called around noon with updates. Christina's bail is set at $55,000. Since all her accounts are frozen, she'll have to find someone else to cover it. What about Marcus? $220,000. Apparently, the judge wasn't impressed with his history of financial crimes. I certainly hadn't known about Marcus's criminal background. But then again, I'd been excluded from most family financial discussions. Christina and Marcus had always spoken to me like I was a child when money came up, simplifying concepts they assumed I couldn't understand. They were about to learn how much I'd actually understood. Benjamin, I want to make some changes to the house. Christina had contractors lined up to renovate. I'd like to proceed with some of those plans, but with my own vision. Excellent idea. It's your home now, Dorothy. Do whatever makes you happy. What made me happy, I realized, was the idea of undoing every assumption Christina had made about my inheritance. She'd planned to gut the kitchen, replace the hardwood floors, and convert Thomas's study into a wine cellar. I was going to turn the study into an art studio and the basement into a library.
My phone rang.
Unknown number. Mrs. Martinez, this is Jennifer Lopez from Channel 12 News. We understand you're the victim of a significant elder fraud case involving your daughter. Would you be willing to share your story? Word was getting out. In a city like Phoenix, the arrest of a prominent financial advisor and his lawyer wife for defrauding his elderly mother-in-law was news. Ms. Lopez, I appreciate your interest, but I'm not ready to make public statements. I understand this must be difficult, but your story could help other seniors recognize warning signs of family financial abuse. She had a point. How many other women my age were being manipulated by adult children who saw them as inconvenient obstacles to inheritance. If I decided to tell my story, would I have control over how it's presented? Absolutely. We could arrange a sit-down interview where you'd have approval over the final edit. I thought about Christina, probably sitting in a jail cell right now, still believing this was all a misunderstanding she could charm her way out of. Ms. Lopez, let me get back to you. I might have quite a story to tell. After hanging up, I poured myself a glass of the expensive wine Marcus had sent us for Christmas. Wine I was apparently now drinking in my own house, purchased with my own money, while contemplating whether to publicly humiliate my daughter on television. Life had certainly taken an interesting turn. But that's when things got really complicated. Because there was someone I hadn't mentioned yet, someone whose involvement would change everything I thought I knew about this situation. The doorbell rang at 7:30 a.m. sharp. Through the window, I could see Christina on my front porch, wearing yesterday's clothes and looking like she'd aged 10 years overnight. She'd made bail somehow. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. Mom, please. We need to talk.
We talked yesterday.
You told me to find somewhere to die. I found somewhere to live instead. Christina's eyes were red-rimmed, her usual perfect composure completely shattered. I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But I'm still your daughter. Are you? Because daughters don't typically forge legal documents to steal their mother's inheritances. I wasn't stealing. I was. She stopped, clearly struggling to find words that didn't sound criminal. You were what, Christina? I was trying to protect you from making poor financial decisions. You've never managed large amounts of money. Even now, even after being arrested for fraud, she couldn't admit the truth. In Christina's mind, she was still the victim of my unreasonable expectations. Christina, let me share something your father told me 8 months before he died. He said he was worried about your sense of entitlement, your attitude toward money, and how you treated people you considered beneath you. Her face went pale. Dad never said that. He said you reminded him of his sister, Elena. Beautiful, charming, and completely incapable of thinking about anyone but yourself. He told me he was changing the will specifically because he was afraid of what you'd do to me if you had control. That's a lie. I pulled out my phone and showed her a video recording. Actually, it's not. Your father recorded a video message explaining his decision, to be played if you ever contested the will or if you treated me poorly after his death. Christina stared at the phone like it was a poisonous snake. He knew, sweetheart. He knew exactly who you were underneath all that charm. The only thing he didn't predict was how far you'd actually go. Play it, she whispered. I touched the screen and Thomas's voice filled the morning air, clear, measured, and absolutely devastating. If you're hearing this, Christina, it means my fears about your character were justified. I hoped I was wrong. I hoped that my daughter had more integrity than I suspected. But if Dorothy is playing this recording, it means you've proven me right in the worst possible way. Christina sank onto the porch steps as Thomas's voice continued. I spent 45 years watching your mother sacrifice her dreams, her ambitions, her independence to take care of our family. She worked part-time jobs to help pay for your college while I built my business. She postponed her education, gave up career opportunities, and poured herself into being the wife and mother she thought we needed. The recording continued for 4 more minutes, each word carefully chosen, each sentence a scalpel cutting through Christina's justifications and self-deceptions. By the time you hear this, you'll have discovered that treating your mother poorly has cost you everything. I hope it was worth it. If a father's last words to his daughter don't convince you to subscribe, then tell me in the comments, why does loyalty, love, and justice mean so little to you? When it ended, Christina was crying. Not the pretty tears she'd used to manipulate people since childhood, but ugly, broken sobs. He hated me, she whispered. No, Christina. He loved you enough to hope you'd prove him wrong. You chose to prove him right instead. She looked up at me, mascara streaking her cheeks. What happens now? Now you face the consequences of your choices. The fraud charges, the investigation, the public humiliation when this story hits the news. The news? Christina's face crumpled completely. Mom, please think about what this will do to the grandchildren, to Marcus's career, to our whole family. I am thinking about it. I'm thinking about how you didn't consider any of those things when you decided to commit multiple felonies. She stood up slowly, looking older and more defeated than I'd ever seen her. I know you won't believe this, but I never meant for it to go this far. I wanted the money. I wanted the security, the status. I wanted to never have to worry about anything again. For the first time since this nightmare began, Christina was telling the truth. I believe you, sweetheart. But wanting something doesn't justify destroying people to get it. She nodded, tears still flowing. What can I do to fix this? You can start by admitting what you did was wrong. Not misguided, not protective, not complicated wrong. It was wrong. It was completely, unforgivably wrong. And then you can face whatever consequences come next with some dignity, instead of trying to manipulate your way out of them. Christina looked at me for a long moment, seeing perhaps for the first time not the pushover mother she'd always known, but the woman who had just outmaneuvered her completely. I deserved this, didn't I? Yes, Christina. You absolutely did. But here's where the story takes another twist, because 3 days after Christina's porch confession, someone else showed up at my door. Someone whose arrival would reveal just how deep this conspiracy actually went. Marcus's business partner, David Kim, was a man I'd met only briefly at family gatherings. He was younger than Marcus, maybe 35, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested he drank too much coffee and slept too little. When he appeared on my doorstep that Tuesday morning, he looked like he hadn't slept at all. Mrs. Martinez, we need to talk. There are things about this situation that you don't understand. I invited him in, curious about what Marcus's partner could possibly tell me that would change anything. David settled himself in my living room like he was preparing to defuse a bomb. Mrs. Martinez, Marcus didn't just help Christina forge those documents. He's been planning this for over a year. Planning what, exactly? The whole thing. The fake will, moving you out, taking control of your husband's assets. It was all Marcus's idea from the beginning. I stared at him, trying to process this information. Are you saying Christina was just following Marcus's plan? I'm saying Marcus identified your husband's estate as a target the moment he married Christina. He's done this before, Mrs. Martinez. To other families. The room suddenly felt very cold. Other families? David pulled out a thick folder. Marcus's first wife died in a car accident 5 years ago, right after her father passed away and left her a substantial inheritance. Marcus was the sole beneficiary of her will. Very convenient timing. You think he killed his first wife? I think Marcus Thompson is very good at being in the right place when wealthy people die. And I think he married Christina specifically because he knew about your husband's money. I thought about all those family dinners where Marcus had seemed so interested in Thomas's business, asking detailed questions about clients, investments, and financial planning. I'd assumed he was just making conversation. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. David looked uncomfortable. Because Marcus is trying to pin everything on Christina. He's claiming she manipulated him into helping her, that he was just a naive husband trying to support his wife's decisions. And you don't believe that? Mrs. Martinez, Marcus has been planning to disappear with your money for months. He set up offshore accounts, created fake identities, and made arrangements to leave the country. Christina never knew any of this. I felt like I was watching a movie where the plot kept changing every 10 minutes. How do you know all this? Because he asked me to help him. He wanted me to create fake investment records to hide money transfers. When I refused, he threatened to destroy my business. David opened his folder and spread out documents across my coffee table. Bank records, passport applications, property deeds in foreign countries, all under various names that weren't Marcus Thompson. Mrs. Martinez, your son-in-law, isn't just a criminal. He's a professional con artist who specializes in marrying into wealthy families and stealing their money. Christina was as much a victim as you were. I stared at the evidence, trying to reconcile this information with what I thought I knew. If this is true, why hasn't Christina told anyone? Because she doesn't know. Marcus convinced her that the plan was her idea. He's very good at psychological manipulation. And you want me to do what with this information? David leaned forward. I want you to help me stop him before he destroys more families. The FBI has been investigating Marcus for 2 years, but they need more evidence to build a solid case. The FBI? I've been working with them as an informant. That's how I know about Marcus's offshore accounts and escape plans. My head was spinning. Christina wasn't the mastermind. She was another victim. Marcus wasn't just a criminal. He was a serial predator who targeted wealthy families. Mr. Kim, are you asking me to wear a wire? I'm asking you to help us catch a very dangerous man before he disappears forever. 2 hours later, I was sitting in an FBI field office downtown, speaking with Agent Rebecca Santos, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who specialized in financial crimes. Mrs. Martinez, Mr. Kim has been providing us with information about Marcus Thompson's activities for 18 months. We believe he's responsible for at least 4 similar schemes in different states. For families that we know of. His pattern is always the same. Marry into money, isolate the victim from family support, steal everything, and disappear. Your daughter may have been his next intended victim after you. Agent Santos showed me photographs of other families Marcus had destroyed. An elderly man in Colorado whose daughter-in-law had convinced him to sign over his ranch. A widow in Nevada whose son-in-law had emptied her retirement accounts. A retired teacher in New Mexico whose grandson-in-law had stolen her life savings. Mrs. Martinez, would you be willing to help us gather evidence against Marcus? What would I have to do? Wear a recording device and convince him to meet with you. Let him think you're willing to negotiate, willing to reduce the charges against him in exchange for information about Christina's involvement. I thought about Christina, sitting in jail, believing she was the criminal mastermind when she was actually another victim of Marcus's manipulation. Agent Santos, if I do this, what happens to Christina? If our investigation proves she was manipulated and coerced, the charges against her could be significantly reduced or dropped entirely. I looked at the photos of Marcus's other victims, families destroyed, life savings stolen, elderly people left with nothing. This man had turned my daughter into a criminal and then planned to abandon her while he escaped with my money. When do we start? The operation took place 3 days later in the visiting room of the county jail. I sat across from Marcus, wearing a wire and pretending to be a defeated old woman ready to make a deal. Dorothy, I'm so glad you came. Christina and I have been worried sick about this whole misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, Marcus. You both stole my inheritance. That's not exactly accurate. Christina was concerned about your ability to manage such a large sum of money. She asked me to help protect you from making poor decisions. Even now, even sitting in jail, Marcus was still lying with practiced ease. Christina told me it was her idea to forge the will, I said, following the script Agent Santos had prepared. Well, yes, she was very insistent about that. I tried to talk her out of it, but you know how determined she can be. Marcus was throwing Christina under the bus without hesitation, just as David Kim had predicted. Marcus, I don't want to see my daughter go to prison for 20 years. If you tell me the truth about what really happened, maybe we can work something out. His eyes lit up with calculated interest. What kind of arrangement? If Christina was just following your advice, maybe the prosecutors would be willing to reduce her charges in exchange for testimony against you. Dorothy, I appreciate what you're trying to do for Christina, but the truth is she was the driving force behind everything. She identified the inheritance as an opportunity. She insisted on moving you out of the house, and she forced me to help create the forged documents. Everything Marcus said was being recorded by the FBI device hidden in my purse. He was constructing a narrative that portrayed Christina as a master manipulator and himself as a reluctant accomplice. But you have experience with legal documents, I pressed. Christina wouldn't have known how to forge a will. That's true, but she researched everything online. She found the printing company. She studied Thomas's handwriting. She even practiced forging signatures for weeks. More lies, more evidence of Marcus's willingness to destroy my daughter to save himself. Marcus, there's something else. The prosecutors found evidence of offshore bank accounts. Christina told them you set those up without her knowledge. For the first time, Marcus looked genuinely worried. What kind of evidence? Bank records, passport applications, property deeds in foreign countries. It looks like you were planning to leave the country with the money. Those accounts were Christina's idea too. She wanted to make sure the money was hidden where the government couldn't find it. Marcus was now claiming that Christina had planned not only the theft but also the escape. The lies were getting more desperate by the minute. Marcus, if that's true, then why does the FBI have recordings of you talking to David Kim about these accounts 6 months before Thomas died? The color drained from his face. He'd walked directly into the trap Agent Santos had prepared. I don't know what you're talking about. David has been working with the FBI for over a year. They have recordings of you planning this entire scheme, threatening David when he refused to help, and discussing your previous victims. Marcus stared at me with a mixture of fear and rage. The charming son-in-law was gone, replaced by someone cold and calculating. You're wearing a wire, he said quietly. Yes, I am. And you just confessed to conspiracy, fraud, and planning to flee the country with stolen money. Marcus leaned back in his chair, finally understanding that his game was over. You have no idea what you've done, Dorothy. There are people involved in this who won't appreciate FBI attention. Are you threatening me, Marcus? I'm warning you. Christina may have been naive, but she married into something bigger than you understand. Agent Santos had prepared me for this possibility. Marcus was going to try one last manipulation fear. Marcus, the only thing I understand is that you destroyed my family, stole my money, and turned my daughter into a criminal. Whatever else you're involved in, the FBI will handle it. Christina will never forgive you for this. Christina will thank me when she realizes you were planning to let her take the blame while you disappeared with my money. 2 hours later, I was sitting in Agent Santos's office, reviewing the recording of Marcus's confession. Mrs. Martinez, this is exactly what we needed. Marcus has admitted to multiple felonies and implicated himself in a larger criminal enterprise. What happens to Christina now? Based on this evidence and David Kim's testimony, we believe Christina was coerced and manipulated. She'll likely face reduced charges and community service instead of prison time. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized was there. Christina had made terrible choices, but she'd been manipulated by a professional criminal who specialized in destroying families. Agent Santos, you mentioned other victims. Will they get their money back? That's our hope. We've traced Marcus's offshore accounts, and we're working with international authorities to recover stolen assets. It's a complex process, but we're optimistic. And Marcus Thompson is looking at 25 to 30 years in federal prison. He'll never hurt another family. That evening, I drove to the county jail to visit Christina. She looked smaller somehow, sitting across from me in the visiting room, wearing an orange jumpsuit that made her look younger than her 42 years. Mom, I heard they arrested Marcus again. What's happening? Christina, there are things about Marcus that you didn't know. Things that change everything about this situation. I told her about David Kim's visit, the FBI investigation, and Marcus's history of targeting wealthy families. I watched her face change as she realized the scope of her husband's deception. He told me it was my idea, she whispered. He made me believe I was protecting you by taking control of the money. I know, sweetheart. I practiced forging Daddy's signature because Marcus said we needed to update some insurance documents. He told me the will was just a backup plan in case you made poor financial decisions. Christina began crying again, but these were different tears. Not tears of self-pity, but tears of understanding. Mom, I'm so sorry. I believed everything he told me. I thought I was being smart, taking charge, protecting our family's future. Christina, Marcus is a professional manipulator. He's done this to other families, other women. You were as much a victim as I was. But I still chose to believe him over you. I still threw you out of your own house. I still said horrible things to you. She was right. Marcus had manipulated her, but she'd made her own choices about how to treat me. Yes, you did. And that's something we'll have to work through. Christina nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. The FBI said they might reduce my charges. They said you'll probably get community service instead of prison time. I don't deserve your help. No, you probably don't. But you're still my daughter, and I can't undo 42 years of loving you just because you made terrible decisions. What happens when I get out? I thought about that question carefully. Christina had been manipulated, but she'd also revealed something fundamental about her character during this ordeal. That depends on who you choose to be, Christina. The woman who threw her mother out of her own house, or the woman who learns from her mistakes and does better. I want to do better, Mom. I want to earn your trust again. Then you'll have the chance. But it's going to take time, and it's going to require real changes, not just pretty words. Christina was released 3 weeks later, with 2 years of community service and mandatory counseling. Marcus was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution to his victims. The media coverage was intense but fair. Channel 12's interview with me became a national story about elder abuse and family fraud. I received hundreds of letters from other seniors who had experienced similar manipulation from adult children. That response inspired me to create the Dorothy Martinez Foundation for Elder Protection. Using $15 million of my inheritance, we fund legal aid for seniors facing family financial abuse and support legislative changes to strengthen elder protection laws. Christina completed her community service at our foundation, helping other families navigate the legal system after experiencing elder abuse. Working with victims gave her a perspective on her own actions that no amount of counseling could have provided. It took 2 years, but Christina and I slowly rebuilt our relationship. Not the old relationship where I was the accommodating mother and she was the entitled daughter, but a new relationship between two adults who had learned hard lessons about trust, respect, and family. Marcus's other victims recovered most of their stolen money through the FBI's Asset Recovery Program. David Kim received immunity for his cooperation and started a new financial consulting firm that specializes in protecting elderly clients from family fraud. The house on Saguaro Lane became truly mine for the first time in 45 years. I renovated it according to my own taste, turning Thomas's study into an art studio where I rediscovered my love of painting. The basement became a library filled with books I'd always wanted to read, but never had time for. I also hired a live-in companion, Maria Gonzalez, a retired nurse who became both friend and protector. At 71, I wasn't taking any chances with my security or independence. 6 months later, I was featured in a Netflix documentary called The Mother's Gambit, which told the story of how I outmaneuvered my own daughter and exposed a criminal conspiracy. The documentary won 2 Emmy Awards, and the proceeds went to elder advocacy organizations across the country. Today, I split my time between running my foundation, painting in my studio, and traveling to places I'd always dreamed of seeing. Christina and I have dinner every Sunday, but she earns her place at my table through actions, not expectations. Marcus writes me letters from federal prison, still trying to manipulate me, still claiming he was trying to protect our family. I don't read them anymore. Some people never change, and I've learned to recognize the difference between those who can't learn and those who won't. The money, all $33 million of it, sits in carefully managed investments that will fund my foundation long after I'm gone. Thomas would be proud to know that his careful planning not only protected me, but is now protecting hundreds of other families from the kind of betrayal we experienced. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how everything played out. If I wish I'd handled things quietly, privately, kept it within the family. I tell them that keeping quiet is what predators count on. They depend on shame, embarrassment, and family loyalty to protect them from consequences. Christina and Marcus expected me to be the polite, accommodating woman I'd always been, even when they were destroying my life. Instead, I chose to be the woman Thomas saw when he wrote that will. The woman who was strong enough to fight back, smart enough to win, and stubborn enough to make sure justice was served. Christina learned that actions have consequences. Marcus learned that not every elderly woman is an easy target. And I learned that it's never too late to discover who you really are when your back is against the wall. The biggest lesson? Don't underestimate someone just because they've been quiet for a long time. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone thinks is harmless. I may be 71 years old, but I'm not done fighting. My foundation helps a new family every week, and every case reminds me why I chose to speak up instead of disappearing quietly. Thomas used to say that chess isn't won by the player who makes the most moves, but by the player who thinks the furthest ahead. Christina and Marcus thought they were playing checkers with a confused old woman. They had no idea I was playing chess. The Foundation's latest case involves a 90-year-old man whose grandson is trying to steal his farm using forged power of attorney documents. Sound familiar? We've seen it all before, and we know exactly how to fight back. Because here's what I want every person watching this to understand. Elder abuse thrives in silence and dies in sunlight. The moment you shine a light on it, the moment you refuse to be ashamed or quiet, is the moment the abusers lose their power. Your voice matters. Your story matters. Your refusal to be victimized matters. And if someone tries to tell you that you're too old, too confused, or too weak to fight back, remember my story. Remember that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming everything your enemies never thought you could be. Christina calls me every Wednesday now, not because she has to, but because she wants to. She's rebuilding her life, raising her children with better values, and working to make amends for the pain she caused. Marcus, on the other hand, will spend the next 28 years thinking about his choices from a federal prison cell. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. The difference between them?
Christina chose to change.
Marcus chose to stay the same. If this story doesn't move you to hit subscribe right now, then be brave enough to drop a comment explaining why you'd ignore a 71-year-old woman who fought back and won when everyone counted her out. That choice is available to everyone. The question is, what will you choose when life tests your character? For me, the choice was clear. I chose to fight back, speak up, and refuse to disappear quietly. And that, my friends, has made all the difference. Thanks for watching my story. Don't forget to subscribe, and please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you've experienced elder abuse or family fraud, know that you're not alone, and it's never too late to fight back. Your story matters, and your voice can help protect others from the same betrayal. Until next time, remember, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. Stay strong, and never let anyone convince you that you're too old to start over.